Okay, I'm gonna get started, but I'm gonna have to go get my coffee in a minute. So, um, at least I can test everything's up and running fine. Restarted the machine last night, which is a rarity these days. I've fallen into I don't know whether you call it a bad habit, but a habit of definitely uh, come on over there. A habit of sleeping the computer most times rather than actually shutting it fully down, so I can just step back to it and continue working. So this is getting ridiculous. I seem to be doing Copilot updates every single day. And with something like Copilot, it seems silly not to update it frequently. Light as well. Probably should turn the light on before I get sun in my eyes. There you go. This morning felt like a coffee morning, so I ordered coffee. It should be here shortly. So the goal of today's stream is to get the unit test written around the update, get the update in place. I did do some more yesterday on the tests and stuff, but I didn't really get to completing the task. Grumpy, good morning. How are you doing? Graham, hello. How are you doing? Oh, I really got to turn that off every single time. How was your stream, Grumpy? My stream was freedom loving stream as usual. You won't be able to know. There is a Discord if you want to post a link. Oh, you're doing Agile. Yeah, so I've been working on this this tool for a while now. The goal is to build something that is I hit the Discord server limit. No worries. Yeah, Angular. So the goal is to build an application that is more appropriate for. Let me stop all them quickly. I've just restart the machine, so things are not running as they should. More appropriate for the planning and management side of things than they are for the developer, because most of what we do in the tooling around development is not for the developer, it's for the product and management teams. The developer really just cares about the work they're meant to do. So if that's the case, I want to focus on the getting the developer the actual information they need and trying to establish a set of tools that will help gather and refine information before it actually becomes stories as such. And then the developer can focus on actual work. Couple of ways of doing that. Actually creating a dedicated planning section of the application so that the the product team can actually go through and be asked, what are the requirements? How does it look? Before they create stories from things, they can kind of brainstorm and build these things up and then review with developers and then actually decide what is a real story. And then on the The idea being this should load in. First start and all. There you go. So the idea being that they can add in these planning items as such and kind of tag it which projects it's going to live on eventually, or which projects they think it's going to live in, and be able to track, I've removed a piece of this right this second, which is the start of the requirements. I'm kind of focused on the UI right now to try and get some workflows in place to start advancing the application a bit. But basically the idea is that a review date will always be required, and you'll be, prompted, these need to be looked at. And then the system will be able to be notified, people will be able to be notified of, past due items, changes to them, updates to their review dates and things like that, so that the management side, if you look at Jira, the majority of it is based around telling management where they are with things and trying to give them intelligence into that thing. It isn't a developer-focused tool. But developers spend more time fighting with it than others do. So I want to kind of focus some energy on giving the planning a bit of a look, so that this stuff doesn't become stories that sit in a backlog. The backlog would never be anything but an organized by review date set of items. But everything that would be there should be at least planned out. So yeah. So Angular, because I'm more comfortable with Angular. I'm not a huge fan of Blazor. It is not my go-to technology as yet. I just feel that Blazor is too inconsistent. And yeah, and I've done Angular for several years, so I'm more comfortable with it. So yeah. And my job, the user Jira winds up a cargo call of ensuring that the correct number of story points are assigned. Right. Which oftentimes is, I mean, I don't know how it is for you, but it oftentimes becomes part of, you're trying to point anemic stories with empty requirements because they've just been it's just on a whim, or it's we need this now. We can't take the time to actually go off and analyze it or give you the requirements properly. And the points mean nothing because the actual work wasn't what people thought it was, because you're basing it on guesswork and no analysis. And then gut feel. You do get to do spikes. Yeah, if you've got a larger project, being able to go off and do some prep for that is useful. Depending, as I learned from Dota the other day, our definition of what a spike is slightly different. My definition of a spike is any research work, any documentation, and should not take no longer than half a day. He has a different expectation of what a spike involves, but ultimately I feel that spikes are good ways of going ahead and figuring things out. But at the end of the day, we often end up in this, I mean, I do end up in this, oh yeah, here's what we need. And it's like one line or a couple of lines of gibberish that just, they expect me to fill in all the gaps. And then we end up with assumptions. And assumptions are bad. So what are you doing today, Grumpy? And shouldn't you have disappeared like long ago? Suppose you end your stream at 7, right? Normally. My time, 7. Our spikes. So you figure out what this vague notion of a task will need. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to the actual... So, as much as I want to focus on this planning aspect, because I think it's a key component of what I want, and it's the biggest differentiator to me over things like Jira, etc. Nice. So I'm focused on the planning side of things, but when I get to the actual story breakdown side of things, I'm hoping I can get some discussions in with people once they start to see how it's applying, as to how we approach different things in Jira even. I've mainly just used story cards in Jira, and everything's become part of that. And then what we've got into is the habit of breaking a story down into, a story should be a component of work that can be done and completed in a sprint, and a story should never, it should be an independently deployable piece. Tasks in Jira I've not really used a lot of, mainly because it makes a mess of the scrum boards to have all the tasks in there. But Dota's mentioned using tasks a lot, and getting our terminology understanding there is going to be an interesting step. So I'm looking forward to that component, but I don't want to rush too far ahead into it when I've got. I want to make sure that the notification stuff is in place. I want to make sure that the gathering of requirements is in place, because I think that's a kind of key component. It does make a mess, but at my job we use them for stuff that needs doing, mainly paying off or paying interest on tech debt. Yeah. But and again, I actually think that the Scrum board is a management tool. It's not actually a useful tool for the developers, because the developers care about, what work do I have to do, what is the priority of that work, and and as long as they're notifying people that they're working on stuff, that's all they care about. And when it's done, what status is it in? But they don't really care about the Scrum board particularly, because it's in one of a few phases for them. It's either not assigned to them, and they've got to work on it, or that's it. Not assigned to them being, if they've finished the work and it's gone to QA, it's still not really assigned to them. It's assigned to QA to handle and decide what happens next. And then from a release schedule, management want to see when it should be done and all those sorts of things. But Jira is a very flexible tool for managing a pile of stuff to do. That is so flexible in what it can do that isn't good for anything in particular out of the box. It needs to be heavily customized with filters and such to become actually useful. Yeah, you end up creating dashboards and you end up creating lists and stuff like that. But again, at the heart of it, all Jira is a tool that is built to help management see where they are with things, see how much progress is being made on things. It's when we're using it as developers to try and track where we are and how it's being used. So what I'm trying to do is cut down the actual backlog to a list of items that have been handled. The idea ultimately will be to have a full ticket system and planning and then stories, right? So the three components combine. Tickets come in from customers. Tickets are either handled or they require further work. If they require urgent development, that can be pushed through as, because the requirements go through. Jira's great for stuff like tickets, customer issues, but they shoehorned it into a development process thing. Yeah. So what I'm aiming for here is getting out the developer's way. Where are we with something? Well, that's going to be the notifications and alerts and things like that. So people will be able to tune what they get told about what, right? So if I care about items being added that refer to the planning project, then I would get notified in a summary, a new item was added. by X user, and then, what do you want to know about it? Do you want to know if is it relevant? If it is, do you need urgent notifications? If it changes, if its progress changes, if its review date, it gets updated, so it gets pushed back, etc. Be able to customize those alerts to be very much an informative thing. To try and reduce the amount of time that developers have to be involved with stuff, because again, we end up with these stories sat there and like, oh, where are we with this project? Where are we with that project? Oh, what's the status of this thing? And you're focused on the next thing already, right? So if they can say, oh, well, that's actually sat waiting QA, or that's in, that's moved from QA, it's gone into release ready. Where is it now? They can see that. So I want to create dashboards that are, or rather Scrum boards that cross multiple projects, so people can see things they care about, what the status is at a glance without having to actually ask anybody. I really do want to try and cut down the amount of time a developer has to spend explaining how things are, or trying to understand the tools that aren't really their wheelhouse. I think we all become kind of experts on things that we don't need to become experts on. So I need to just step away. I'll be right back. I just need to get my coffee. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so caffeination does matter, yes. I've taken to drinking a few coffees a day, but then once I get into the afternoon, it's just water. And then a little bit more exercise than normal. Okay, so the focus, my UI overhaul of this tool right now is focused solely on trying to figure out some of the workflows, because I can keep building features for the back end, but unless I have an idea of where they are heading, I need the UI. I've lost 139 pounds since April 2023. Wow, that's impressive. Now we're 241 pounds. Congratulations. That's losing a full adult attached to you. That's really impressive. I've been at 270 pounds now for the past 2 years. Like, I haven't gained much and I haven't lost much. Mainly because my diet is difficult at best. I'm not particularly good at keeping to a diet, and my wife and daughter are pains in the backside when it comes to eating. So I generally eat what they eat, which is never good. But I do karate 5 times a week. And the doctor's like, yep, don't make a difference. Eat less food. Thanks. So eat less food, have less energy, do less karate, exercise less. No, I know I'm not trying to out exercise a bad diet entirely. I have cut down a lot of stuff. Just I'm not cutting out everything. So I probably am not offsetting it as much as I should do. But there's many reasons that go into that one. Okay. Yeah, I've got a feeling that's the path I'm heading down. I barely red meat. I barely eat bacon or anything anymore. I eat a little bit of processed meat through the week. But I do need to cut it back a little bit more. And carbs and things are my enemy, because I do like carbs. I eat way too many of them. Yeah. Yep. Anyway, must be off for my adulting. Grumpy, thank you very much for the raid. Thank you for coming in, you and Graham. I appreciate it, and have a great day. Thank you very much. Okay, so planning item updated. This is where this is about to get interesting. So this is actually giving me a reason to add in some new features, but it allows me to reconsider the way I've designed the object so far and really start to get into the concept of an aggregate. Because now I'm actually at that point where this is getting a little messy. So that's not going to really give me where am I looking? I'm looking for Amachai Mountain Band clean architecture. There you go. And I apologize if I just completely wrecked his name. Okay. So this gentleman has a clean architecture example. And what I'm looking to see is if he has used. So he has an entity and a subscription is an entity. What I'm looking for is how does he add. So application, infrastructure, migrations, where are models? Migrations, that's fine. Services, security, reminders, common. Contracts, subscriptions. That's just a shared. So what I'm looking for is some inspiration, ultimately, right? So I have an update planning item, say. This update planning item is going to pull a planning item. And right now, my model, my database model, and my behaviors are kind of wrapped up into the same thing, right? And it's getting worse, which at this point I feel needs a little bit of a redesign. And yes, I'm going to put this all under this guise of introduce PrimeNG because it's given me a reason for change. And I'm doing exactly what I'm trying to avoid us doing in reality in my own code base, which is, the irony is not lost on me. So I have a behavior wrapped with a data model, and it's making a mess because these fields here shouldn't be part of this, right? The actual behavior here should be internally. This is a planning item aggregate, and it will create a planning item, and it will track it, and it will be responsible for retrieving it and all sorts, I think. But what I want to know is people who are well-recognized experts in this field. I want to see how they attack this, because if I'm developing a code base that one day I hope to have many people sign and working in, they may have experience of this sort of stuff. If my design is drastically different to everybody else's of using the same terminology, then I end up with a challenge because people they may not put the right concepts in. They might not quite understand how I'm using it. Let's have a look at our Dallas clean architecture, if you use aggregates at all. The funny thing is that they're the same but different, right? So Ardalis does not lay out, Steve Smith is Ardalis, by the way. They do not lay out their applications the same. So use cases is application, core is domain. So he does have a contributor aggregate, and in there is a contributor with an entity base. This has fields on it, and it is an aggregate root. Here's a phone number class, so these value objects, a contributor status, which is a smart enum. He has the specs for getting it. He has the handler for doing. That's interesting. So he puts the handler in the domain. Not the application. So why? So where's the application then doing it? So contributors get. Let's have a look at delete. Delete contributor command and handler. Return. This approach, keep domain events in the domain model. This becomes a pass-through. This is Ardalis's preferred approach. Another approach, do the real work here, including dispatching domain events. Change the event from internal to public, using the service above so that domain event behavior remains in the domain model. Huh. So my version... Hey Apex, how you doing? Good morning. I merged Hey Apex and morning almost at the same time there, so my apologies. So yeah, again, this is a very different way of doing it, right? So he has a domain event. So this is the domain. The core is his word for domain. He has a handler for the deleted where he deals with deleted and does whatever. I'm not bad. I'm looking forward to making progress in this. I'm looking forward to doing some coding today. And then in the actual application, so his use cases is my application, right? So what he's saying is this behavior here that I'm doing is wrong because I'm producing domain events from within here. well, he's not saying it's wrong. It's his preferred way is this is just a pass through. But then I feel the application isn't doing enough. I think the difference is when a domain service is required is when there's significant logic to what you're doing with that thing. But that's interesting that essentially domain could have its own command handlers, etc. But this is why I'm looking at these examples right this second, because I don't want to go too far ahead. So I have this concept of assign user, right? An assign user that actually should be nullable. And that should be nullable. It can be unassigned. It's not. Can I convert? Oh, I know why. There you go. So I have this behavior in essentially my application layer, but his argument would be that this should really be in domain because there's actual behavior involved in doing this. I'm going to leave mine as is. All I want to do is move towards a more I want this to be an aggregate fetch rather than an actual specific model fetch, and then the aggregate will be responsible for getting the item and saving the item, I think. But I've got to find an example of that. So in his design, the aggregate is the data, and the actions themselves, I suppose. Yeah, this is a little. His example's a little bit far off. Amichai, again, I apologize if I'm destroying his name. His domain has calendar, subscription is an entity. A user has data. Delete reminder, delete all reminders, has reached daily. My biggest problem with this is the size of this is going to increase quite substantially. Now, you do end up with a world of all the behavior for your domain model lands inside of your domain model, I suppose. So subscriptions, commands, create subscription. So I put all these together. So you have create subscription, which means that his folder structure makes sense here. But yeah. Breaks it up. So they're not using aggregate. So they're using. Does he have any concept of aggregate? Aggregate. No, he has no concept of aggregates in his. Now this is, by his own words, is the ultimate clean architecture template, right? Ardalis's aggregate is a little bit light. And it's not from This is the challenge with building a system based upon concepts that you are sharing. If I get it wrong, I tell a different story again, right? So these two don't agree. Right. Clean architecture. There's one other example. There's at least one or two others. I can't remember where they are now. There's Ardalis. So his comes up as one of the first links, right? Jason Taylor. I think he's another one that I referenced. So we go to source. So he has application domain. So application, to-do list, commands, create. He has the handler. He loads the entity, sets the title. So he's doing simple data objects, right? Good to see the validators are common. Our behavior there isn't too wrong. So in terms of structure, it seems to be that this is more common. Update, planning item. And then you take this. And then split that out. I'm doing it just to see. I'm going to undo it in a second because I kind of prefer the way I've done it so far. Yeah. Following files cannot be undone. That's fine. Less nesting. All the behaviors there. The only challenge with mine is the validators can get messy, but I can always create partial classes there. But anyway, that's not the real focus. So in this case, an entity is loaded, a to-do list entity, so that should be in the domain. Entities to-do item. That is base auditable entity. So his design falls more closely with mine. The only difference is I don't expose the actual properties because I want to make sure that I have methods so that the right domain events can be triggered, right? But again, there's no aggregate in here. So base entity, base auditable entity, created by. So yeah, that's basically my base entity. Then the domain events behavior. I don't like using attributes like that because that means that my model is 100% entity framework or data annotations. I mean, they could be used by anything, but he's either British or Australian. I bet. Colour. That's funny. You created your own colour class just so you could use the UR spelling. Well, It's a value object. Okay, so it's just so we can store those, but that's funny. It looks like the exact color. Create. So his is closer to mine in design. What I've got so far is definitely a meld of the three. Who else does this? Clean architecture. Regrets. So the problem with this is the terminology and the design borders on full-on DDD, right? But it's not full DDD, it's DDD light, essentially, because you can kind of work out the domain, but you're not going through all that modeling effort of wow, that ain't good. Who was the article by? Well, to some extent, Delta, good morning, by the way. I'm trying to see, so again, I'm not trying to go down the full let's explore DDD path. I'm trying to see how people apply it when they're using clean architecture, because they verge on. I mean, we have a thing called the domain, right? But it's not quite domain-driven design. But the terminology crosses over and some of the concepts. So I'm looking at the examples that people have again, and they are wildly different in how they handle models. But my models are now more complicated than I want them to be. So I'm looking at alternative designs to try and make sure I'm building something that's flexible enough. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there. Mr. Jones, good afternoon. How are you doing? Yeah, I need to reach out to him again. Check these are all good. He's been very busy. So I'm not bad. I'm not bad. Oh, so you just laid it out. No, I think, Mohammed, you took this as a... Why are you doing claims stuff? I don't like that. Yeah, would we put him off complaining? No. He's just been very busy with stuff. So, heading to work early. Good luck streaming. Dota, thank you very much for stopping by. Appreciate it. Have a great day. I'll see you again soon. I've got a feeling my room is not quite level, because I tend to roll to the left, even without the mat. Okay. So, Mohammed's example there is not what I need. So what I'm looking to do today is I'm looking to get this update done, right? So I want the unit tests in there, and basically it will be enough if I can get the update path done. So we can come in here and hit save, and this will update, and we can change things then, right? It gives me time to think about how I want the other stuff to work, because obviously I do have requirements to add in here. What does that look like? Do I make this tabbed? Do I make this just the entry and then say, okay, give some links and you can navigate and it'll push you into a new screen? What's that design look like? And that's exactly why I'm doing the UI overhaul, is because I want to address those things and ask the questions. But before I get there, I want to tackle this. So right now I have this, I can load the entity out of the database, right? I can load the model out of the database, and this is this planning item, and it populates these fields. These are private because what I want to do is I want to protect. You can't just set a value on a model, right? The idea being that you have to have a reason for it changing. So once you initialize the model, and you do that with a static method, right? You create it and it has to have these fields. Once you do that, there's other actions that can be performed, right? If I associate projects, then I can add the associated projects. I could also trigger an event here if I wanted to. I don't need a domain event in associating projects, but maybe I do need to update them or set them, etc. So there could be different events here. Assigning the user, right? Planning item is assigned. That changes that. Requirement added to planning item. So there's all sorts of different things that I might want to trigger that allow my system to be more reactive, and therefore composable. Right, so updating the planning item is a pretty simple act that's easily done in the application layer. The domain events that fire chain everything together, and that's kind of where Ardalis puts that sort of behavior in the planning, in the domain area, which does kind of make sense that domain events deal with the domain, therefore they should be within the domain. That might be a bigger refactoring than I want to take on right this second. But at the very least, I want to ask the question of myself and validate whether I'm good proceeding. Is it enough? Because this probably does span into the domain service world here, because there's a lot going on in this, right? Because ultimately what I'm saying is, if planning item dot description doesn't equal command dot description, and you get the idea, then something needs to happen, and each one of those is going to have a different piece, something like that, right? So for each one of them where I'm going to change it, and again, the only reason I want to protect them is so that you don't have the ability to just change a field, and it's wrapped up inside so that you, even if you come along to this application later and you load a planning item, you don't have in a different handler, because you could load the planning item from all sorts of handlers, right? You don't have an ability to bypass any domain events that should fire. So an aggregate is normally what I would think of here. I love that the top account is under review by Medium. George. Numerous posting questions about concepts central. Here's one example which asks about aggregates and the place of the business logic which enforces the rules spanning several aggregates. And this is where I often struggle, is I'm better seeing code and understanding how code is structured than I am reading someone's description of something. So none. Now, in general, my understanding is the concept of the aggregate, and it's kind of, this is an aggregate now, because a planning item is not just a planning item, right? A planning item is the combination of the planning out, the core detail plus the requirements plus the user assigned to it plus the associated projects, etc. These are values attached to it that are not, that don't have any direct, I'm going to use the word value again, being independently managed, but they do have, in relation to the core planning item object aggregate, they do have value. See here that we're using it for gets and stuff. Let's have a look. Uncle Bob. Several architectures have similar characteristics: hexagonal, DDD, DCI, and clean. Separation is emphasized by DDD CQRS. UI, databases, use cases, domain. See, he used the word domain over domain model, right? Because again, we're still talking about domain in the same general theme of the modeling of the system, the design of the actual relation of things to other things, etc., in relation to how the business works. Whereas I believe that the difference there would be that's an actual model with the wow, can't think of it. Contexts, bounded contexts worked out and all those sorts of things, and how they interrelate, and modeling the system around those things. Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, what Uncle Bob's saying there, and you know, loving or hating me, he's done a lot more for writing up this sort of stuff and describing ways of doing this sort of stuff than a lot of people have. But ultimately, it comes down to, even if they're different, they're the same in that we're all aiming for a clean code base that is easily readable, and broken down properly. So, as much as that was interesting to see, it doesn't really help me go further forward, does it? So, one option I have here is I could create an aggregates folder. Let's see if I can just do it. Let's see if I can do something. What I'm seeing is there's not much stopping me from doing this my own way, as long as I'm following that general rule that an aggregate is kind of a combining of behavior. All I'm trying to do is separate out the actual model from separate out the actual model, the model data, the actual database data from the thing, so that it doesn't look like it's doing two things at once, right? So let's try and build something. So let's do a planning item aggregate. And again, I'm only naming it aggregate right now because ultimately that could be planning item aggregate, could be planning item, and that's all you care about. This is an actual planning item model or something, right? So my thought here is this takes a planning item. Right? And then the methods that are on the planning item say public static. Now, to do it this way, I would reverse this decision, right? All these would now be get sets. And what you would do is handle them in here. So in this code, what I'd end up doing is writing something like this. So var planning item equals await repository dot get aggregate async planning item. Right, something like that. And this extension method on iRepository of whatever would know that it's loading that, and it'd populate the aggregate, and then the pattern would be this. So you wouldn't actually go to you could still go and get a planning item and load it and change it. There is a risk there, but I think if I do it right, those could be kind of hidden in the background. Is my feeling. And I'm always open to discussion if anybody has any thoughts or opinions on what I'm doing here. I'm always open to talking about this. So what would happen is all these methods, these statics would go away, right? Would they? Those squiggles, by the way, they aren't true. It's one of those cases where I have to ignore it, and I don't like adding comments in, or what they call the exclusion rules for the tooling. So if I'm to do it this way, these move into here, right? So those methods go in here, which does clean up the planning item model, right? So those go in here, and then private planning item get is item, and then that becomes that. That becomes that. And then the domain events are but I can't do this now. Yeah, this is too advanced for what I have right this second. This requires a bit more of an overhaul and a well thought out strategy of doing this. Reason being, right now these domain events are stored on my object, and then when I save the database, when I go to save to the database, they are committed as part of the handle there. So if I switch that up, where that save isn't happening in the database, I then have to know that the aggregate has been committed, the model has been committed to the database, and then publish domain events, because it will flip the behavior of my system in a way that I'm not quite prepared to do. So a lot of talk and a lot of looking for trying to introduce something new and then not to do it. But it does mean that I've at least explored the idea, and I understand the limitations of why I can't just do that. And maybe I need to go off and tinker with a separate component, a separate piece of code, to try and get my head around how you might tackle those problems. Because I have clear problems in this, right? I have this situation where I have multiple requests that need to happen, that do need to fire domain events if they commit as part of the transaction. There is no way that I know of hooking into that transaction commit externally, so I can't just kind of monitor that and do something in reaction to it being committed. So the way it works now is because it's actually creating a transaction against SQL. So when I go and save, once that transaction completes, that save commits a transaction against the database. So it's kind of an enlisted transaction. But anyway, if you have any thoughts, questions, opinions about what I'm doing, please feel free. Okay, so let's continue with this. So when an assigned user is changed, so this is, I have previously had it assigned to somebody else, and now I'm going to change who it's assigned to. So what I'm validating here is, okay, the assigned user is updated, the last update is set, result is success, and I want to validate that, what's the event? Planning item assigned. Planning item assigned event is created, is queued. So on that, I want to say, this is one of those situations where I have a result. The result, I want to validate that it returns true, but I also have a secondary result as such, and it is the planning item. And this is captured when I that update async arg that is p goes to p dot identifier equals dot did that wrong, dot when r goes to I want to capture the planning item that was up when I called update. I want to capture the state of that object then, and what that allows me to do is say planning item dot main events of type Planning item assigned dot p dot equals expected and p dot previous equals current dot where's my testing extensions that are completely necessary because the library exists? Is extensions, is within, is true, is false. Public static void is greater than. Do you offer me greater than or is less than, greater than or equal to? There you are. Is all that, and I have it. I already have it already. 1. So I'm just saying, okay, well, if this happened, then a domain event got published, and it should match these parameters. There should be one of them events queued. So failures all around. This one failed because this doesn't exist because that never happened. Let's go to the actual code. So now this is the other downside as well. With the aggregate, I could do I could do that, right? So let's run the test and see what happens. Okay, so planning item event is queued. The assigned user is updated. Last update is set. So this is a challenge now because I don't want to make this code overly complicated. I don't want to put a load of ifs in here, but this is going to look like this, right? If I don't do something to the code, it's going to look like that. Now, what I could do is I could say if planning item dot assigned user equals command dot assigned user, return result dot success. So if there's no changes, then bail out. And then I could just call these, right? So if extract method no changes, then return success, and then ultimately in here if assigned user is equal to assigned user identifier, return. So make the logic exist in here. So this won't allow you to set it to the same one. It won't do anything because we don't want to trigger the doing event. That's what we're avoiding there. It wouldn't be bad to necessarily do this, but now the behavior's in there. The challenge to doing it that way is you're missing that guard from this code. You don't know that it does it, so it's a side effect. But do you care? I don't think you do. I think it's perfectly fine to do it this way. So again, what I'm trying to do here is document this out cleanly, as best I can. Last updated set. So again, the challenge is the last updated. And wrapping everything up like this means I have no choice but to create a method. The last updated technically lives on here, so everything would have everything would get that. That seems that's easily forgotten about. So that seems a little bit unnecessary. I think that could be. I could look at doing that at the database level, but before the object commits, it will set the last updated. Because if there's changes queued to go, then it knows. If I look at the shared kernel domain event publishing inceptor, right? This knows the object is of entity base. What other overrides do I have here? If event data.context is not null, why doesn't that work? Entity base. Oh, entry. So we'll have to test that, because Because what's going to happen is if I don't do that, then I'm going to have to. Well, it feels wrong to do that every time when it should happen. We'll test it. There's no harm in it doing that the first time. We can see it work, but the other downside to that is now there's a hidden behavior in the system, right? Domain event publishing interceptor. That's not a domain event publishing interceptor, that is it? It's a entity base interceptor. Entity base. Save changes interceptor. And then don't remember infrastructure context. How do they get added? Extensions. Find usages. Gotcha. Planning. So we add. So again, we have another point of failure in that we could end up forgetting that. So we're going to add 2 interceptors. Ultimately, I think now what we do is we create a method in the shared, or the shared DB somewhere, the shared kernel somewhere, that we can set these up with. Because that's not stunning, because I've got to copy that everywhere. Because yeah, anywhere that uses this now, right, needs to, so tickets, now needs this. Yeah. What would I do? Because the difference is the connection string, and that's pretty much it. I think this has entity framework dependencies already. Yeah, it does. So it's not difficult to do. Public static ice service collection. Add. Add pooled DB context with the main events. That's fine. That's another challenge. Planning program. So essentially what we're trying to do is this, right? We're trying to add these in so we don't have to do this. And we can just call this one method and then everything's wrapped up. The benefit of that is that we do not need to then worry about it everywhere else. The challenge is this is now very tied to this. Unless what is this configure? DB context options builder. So if we do an action DB context options builder, and then that goes where does that end is the question. Because my initial thought is that's the dot on top of that. That's the dot on there, so that is definitely there. And then what we do is we do configure options. That takes to that. And then we do that. Return services. So that way, in the program up here, so what I'm worried about is just having to repeat this over and over and over again for the same set of behaviors. If I miss one of these, then the application looks like it works, but I miss a whole load of fields. And it's easy to do the bigger the system gets. The more pieces I add, the more times I do this, the more challenging it becomes. What I can also do with that now is I can actually make that in here, I can actually do if debug and if, right? I can now make sure that's only added in the debug build, and then you don't end up with, if this runs in production, it doesn't log out everything, every SQL query, etc. And I can make that more configurable. So now in here, this should change to be builder.services.add pooled DB context with the main events, planning DB context, and this takes a configure, which is configure.use SQL Server, so I can still control that. I don't have to bring a dependency down on using SQL Server in my shared kernel. And everything else reads the right way. So now that's all I have to copy to the others. And I kind of think that's better. So tickets here again. That's just now tickets, and that's ticket DB context, and the rest is dealt with. Right. And I can still do extra configuration in here. I can still put read only and stuff on. There's nothing saying I can't do it. It's just I can apply. I can apply that. And again, So I can just do build services, add pull domain events. Interesting. Tenant administration context. I can do configure goes to, and I can just take this piece, put that in there, close that up. That's all done. And of course, I've done all that as part of one massive commit against everything, so nothing will make sense later. Because professional and all. Okay. So I did all that to avoid having to put last updated in every single handler, and know that, and I can trust that if I change an entity now, sorry, just yeah, if I change an entity that has last updated, it will get its last updated set, and I don't have to do anything else. So let's go back to here. Now, this isn't stunning because I've actually made this test pass by virtue of just kind of writing out the code. For I need all these fields because I need to call this. I'm just copying and pasting for the sake of time here, not because I relish copying and pasting. Private repository. That's that, and then that goes in there. Then unit tests should both run, and this should return true. Right, that's not good enough. What I need to do is verify that I didn't try and update the entity. Right, so fact entity planning item was not updated. Right, so repository dot did not receive dot update async arg any planning item. Right, it's a violation for this handler. It doesn't matter. I don't need to check on the ID or anything. If it updates a planning item, there's a problem. So you're able to run that and get those tests passing. Interesting. I expected to receive no calls. Actually receive one. Interesting. That's why. Must it out. Thanks. It's a decent stream. Thank you very much for hanging out. Have a great day. Sorry I couldn't get to great levels. This is the unnecessary or the necessary muddling around with this stuff to make sure it's doing what I want it to do. So let's get so when no changes are made, I don't get plan item was updated, I don't get the result is still a success. If I change the user, then I am notified, I do get the result back, and I get an event. When review date is changed, Review date is going to be a big one to actually alter. This might be another one that I create a base class for, because review date is something that is fundamental to a lot of the application. So here, arrange act. The fact would be review date updated. Review date as updated. Event is queued. Again, fact result is success. I want to validate that it's still returning a successful result in all these cases. If I change the way this is done, if I change the way in my testing style, I could make these fewer overall unit tests, less repetition. But because of the way I do the arrange act assert stuff, it does mean that this is best tested in this way. Act. So private, yeah. Arrange. Yep. Yep, it will do that. It will do that. It will do that. So again, the data here is going to be repetitive. That's one downside to this way of testing it. Private read only, date time, expected review date. So I'm going to move it out. Right. This object builder build entity, this is because the planning item itself has a static constructor. I can't just create an instance of planning item. This uses reflection to construct an entity and set all the fields to the right values as I expect them. It has to be able to at least meet the needs of the default constructor, so it has to have tenant identifier, even though in this instance the tenant identifier has no bearing because I know which entity I'm updating. So we act. Oh, really? Result equals none. Get a way to get a result. And then private result dot is success is true. I just need to take my sweater off. It's getting warm. I'll be right back. Oh dear. Okay. So, hey Dan, how you doing? Love the song. Oh, the little 8-bit music that plays on the BRB screen. Yeah. That's cool. How was your stream, by the way? I was lurking in there. Dan is building a game. It's quite an interesting looking game. I don't know quite how to describe it, but worth checking out. It streams a little earlier than I do. I've actually thought about putting some more music on, some more 8-bit stuff. I think it could be make the stream a little bit more fun. It's a good day today. Making progress now on the scenes to tell the game story. Cool. Yeah, I saw you putting the fonts and stuff and the text and stuff in there. I've been lurking in your stream. So I appreciate you posting the going live in my Discord, because that's a good way for me to know. UI is pure paint. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, UI is hard. So what I'm focused on today is trying to get this moving forward, right? So, I've got to get the planning item edit working. So I'm just going through the unit tests for that piece on the server side, so I can wire up the API endpoints. And my goal would be by the end of this stream to at least have that saving. So, yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm using the fact that I updated the item, and I could make this simpler and validate that all of them are as expected, right? Which might read a little easier, and it's less cheaty in terms of the unit tests, right? Because here I'm not validating the negatives. I'm only validating that the right thing was changed. So if you actually updated a review date in this test, is still going to pass, right? So this will be p.reviewDate equals expected review date, right? So to be truthful here, I also want to say p.assigned user is current assigned user identifier, and p.description equals current description. And this is going to get lengthy. P.title equals current title, right? And p.created by user. Should never have a real need to override that one. That's actually going to be a challenge later. But that would be the right way of validating that I'm not changing anything else inside of that test. So I'm saying that, okay, well, for the planning item, the review date now is the expected review date, and everything else is the current data. And again, I want something like this. No. Do I have a review date was changed yet? So on planning item, create from ticket details, add requirement, assign user, associate projects, I do not. So this would be a new method. Public void public void update review date, or see, now that opens up a whole big can of worms, because now there's nothing. this prevents me from ever setting the review date to a previous date and time, right? So I can't ever set it before now. Even if I load this aggregate up or this entity up in different handlers, I can't change the review date any other way. I don't know. We'll see, I suppose. Okay, so shared messaging events, integration events, service events. So these events here are all the events that can happen to publish outside. Internally, these are domain events, right? So planning item, review date, updated. GUID, planning item, identifier, date, time. What do I want this to be? Review date, date time, previous review date. Oh yeah, this is a specific type, isn't it? High domain event. So that now works, that'll queue that. And then again in here, I'm not sure of this. Also, this created by shouldn't be there. There's no need to pass in created by because you created it. Oh, that belongs there. That doesn't belong there. Right, it says it's a value on the model. It shouldn't change anything else. So now this is planning item, review date updated, and then review date equals expected review date and review date equals current review date. Again, this is kind of a double result type of object, but I'm justifying it to myself in that this result is just a simple, yep, did it succeed or not? Whereas the planning item is actually my result that I care about. And I just did the wrong thing. I implemented the code before running the test and getting the red light, but I wasn't adding significant behavior. So review date is updated. Expected to match a call. And so it never set the event. Well, that's a simple one there. So it didn't call update. Okay. Okay. So the problem in this is no changes. So if that equals that and planning item.reviewDate equals command.reviewDate. There's no changes. Again, I've got this logic here protecting me from doing this, but that's a behavior of this handler. Internally here now, I'm doing this validation as well, because I'm going to call this all the time anyway. It does guard against these objects updating unnecessarily. It does guard against domain events being produced, and it stops me from having to put a wrapper around each one of these, because this is just a general, did something change on the object, right? This isn't a, did this change, did this change, did this change? So if I do it this way, I do have that luxury. We're going to get rid of that yellow squiggle in a minute. There we go. So review date is updating. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire this up to the front end and see if we can't get that saving. I know it only does review date and assigned user right now, but that's okay. So in the planning endpoint, so that's the unit test, here's the endpoints. We have planning items, we have put. Put is going to be our updated handler. So this is endpoint. I sender. Okay, and it's going to be an execute, I believe, not a. Actually, let's just do this and get that code in there. Nope. Why aren't you available? Worry about that in a second. What? Oh, I don't need that. It's just okay or bad request. It's not anything special here. So this is an update planning item. And it doesn't need that. It needs the request identifier. It doesn't need the user that's creating it because it's not being created. And it can return okay there. There's no suitable method for override. Endpoint, task, results. Public. Override. That's interesting. You clearly are happy with that there. Oh. That's why. Being an idiot. That's a copy and paste problem. So I put the models that I'm gonna import into the same class because there's no need for this to exist outside of this and create yet another file, yet another thing to track, yet another thing to navigate to. You can have these nested classes, and because it's public, it will work fine. I'm saying put parameters there, but when it's internal, when it's talking about a method internally, it knows that this parameters means this object here. So that's why that works. Not sure why. Oh, there we go. Application policies is an alias. That's going to bite me later. We'll find that out. So you have to be a support user, so it's a validation, and we have to change this verb. Otherwise, nothing's going to start up. So now, result part, the success. Right. There's not really much that can go wrong in there. So now we have an endpoint there. We then have another thing to change in that we need to open recent Ocelot configuration. So planning items needs to have the verb added, so we can put to that now. Let's save that so I don't have to worry about it. But ultimately that will be Ocelot. So we go to Ocelot configuration rather. So Ocelot is the API gateway I'm using. Again, I think it's not the right one. I think I need to swap that out for something more flexible, because I think there is a I can't route the GraphQL API through it. But I'm using what's this called? Console as my what's it called? Service manager and key value configuration. So I store my Kafka configuration here. So when the Kafka consumers and producers are started up in the individual event, in individual services, they make a connection out to this and pull their configuration. And this gives them, hey, if you're publishing this event, this is the topic you go into. So I can control the topics centrally, and even flex these without actually worrying about the individual things. Now, the problem is if I change one of these, I also have to restart any applications that dealt with it, are dealing with it. So that's going to be an issue down the line from an administration perspective. But that's a while away yet. Okay, so in theory, that should all build. Remembering how many changes I've actually made as part of this. Yeah, okay, still building. In the services, planning items service, we now want a public update planning item. And this is where this gets messy again, because observable actually that's not interesting. So we put I suppose we would, wouldn't we? That would be the right. I mean, I'm not trying to make a RESTful API, but that would actually be more appropriate. Tenant management endpoints, projects. They're all posts so far, that's the problem. Planning, endpoints. Yeah. Post, patch. Oh, that's old stuff. That won't work anymore. But that's roughly, is that how I should do it? Fast endpoints. Model binding. So there's a few changes necessary there. So in the Ocelot configuration, this is great and all, but I don't need put there. I need a different template, because I need to deal with ID there. I think that needs to go down there as well, because format document. This one is more specific. I think if I do it the other way, then this one, if I ever post it all in here, which I shouldn't really do, but it will create an issue. So I want to make sure I don't fall foul of anything there. There you go. From route. Interesting. This might be a challenge. We'll see. Let's see if that works. The worst happens is it doesn't, right? So this will now provide us the ability to update something. And right now we've got review date and assigned user. So pretty simple behaviors. On the planning item detail, this is where we're going to save now. So we're going to look at the forms for add planning item. My submit here is what I need. And then planning item, we have to go through the store. Right item is right. Async update planning item. Planning item. Planning item. This is going to change a little bit because the changes I was making yesterday do create a problem for the update side of things, because we have the IDs and not the objects, and blah 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 blah. Patch state, store, update entity, planning item. There's not really much to change there. I'm just kind of putting that structure in there, because I think that there is some things I want to do. I want to make the object not dirty as such, but I do want to say, okay, there's pending things that might have to happen against this thing, so you want to be looking for them. Because again, the disconnected nature of the system, when I write something, it doesn't necessarily make it available for the read side of things. So if there's side effects to changing the review date, or the side effects to changing who is assigned to, etc., then that will factor into that. So we go over here and create this submit now. This will be an update planning item. Pretty much already got the Oh, this is going messy. I do have the project store though. Why do you not? I inject them, but I don't load them. Load detail for. So load detail for is handling that part there. So what I'm looking for here is with methods. So load all will load all the projects up. Can I do this? Filtered, label computed, takes IDs, string array, and returns that. Does that work? Works in theory. Filtered is IDs, string array, yeah, that's the problem. Async filtered. Oh, hold on. Do it right and then see if it's still a problem. No, it does not like that, does it? So in computed, that's fine. Will it let me do filtered IDs, any string? No, that's invalid. Pass arguments to computed functions and your signal store. There's probably a way better way of doing this one. So stored at entities is okay. That's fine. So reason being, here, I have an array of an array of projects filtered. That's a it says promise. I just want to get this one thing done. Doing this for no reason, by the way, because I don't actually need this piece to achieve what I need here. So there's a little bit of wasted effort in this. But we'll worry about that afterwards, right? So in the form, ng submit equals submit. So that's up and running. Let's put a breakpoint in the update. So I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to, if this doesn't work first time, which, you know, that's never going to happen, then I'll have to come back tomorrow and get it solved. Okay, so we got items. So we got to make progress today and change this to the 30th, and change this to the 6th of June, right? When I save that, yeah, I don't think that worked. Pod items undefined. Identifier equals this to identifier. As panning item. Oh, ID. And then in update panning item, we pass in the panning item ID. Let's give that one more try. So we change that to here. We make that the 6th of June. We hit save. No. So we did try to put, but we got 404. That could be though, and I didn't need to restart everything there. That could be though because the API wasn't restarted after I made that osort change. Or I didn't make the osort change. And actually it wouldn't be that, it'd be the gateway that changes, not the, so the API gateway would be the one to change there. API gateway, restart API gateway, just to make sure. And then if we hit save now, nah. Well, it didn't fail. It said it went through. But it can't have gone through because, oh no, we got to a breakpoint. I mean, it's bad. So the identifier didn't come through. Why didn't the identifier come through? Not wholly certain. But either way, so it did route it. It just didn't capture the ID good. So that'll be the focus of tomorrow's stream, to get that wired up and get the rest of those tests in there. If I can get more done today, I will do. But starting to move forward on the application, starting to move forward on the UI, making sure this is all, you know, doing what I want it to do is going to be a challenge. So the next thing to do is add the requirements back in here, figure out what that UI looks like, right? Because right now this is the edit, but what's the detail going to show? How am I going to lay out requirements and things like that? So cool. Well, I want to say thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming and hanging out today. It's been fun. We're going to quickly raid over to Toolbox because I need to go and get ready for work. So take care. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you for hanging out with me. I appreciate it. Take care all. Have a good one.